Hey everyone, how's it going? Now I know I've closed the Terminal Directive Cards series a while back, and this isn't a proper Terminal Directive Cards episode, but there is one card from the big box I'd like to revisit, and that's none other than our good old friend, John Oxford. Yeah, you see, I never really wanted to build a deck around this guy because to showcase its full potential, you would need to actually build a very warped deck that is very negative player experience. We'll get into that in a bit. But now that I've been messing around with regular decks, I've chanced upon a game where I was able to actually get this ID to do quite a bit of work. So let's have a look at that, shall we, today? First off, let me share with you some of my initial evaluation of this ID when it was first released in the big box. Now, one thing I think we can all agree on is that Wilbur Woking was never designed to recur programs in the criminal faction. As hungry as criminals are for program recursion, this just doesn't cut it. The reason being simple. The ID ability innately counters this. Because the corp gets to choose which card is removed from the game, you're going to run into a lot of trouble if you choose your icebreaker and any other card, because the corp will almost certainly remove your icebreaker from the game. To reliably recur your programs, you would need to actually select two cards, both of which are the same type of icebreaker, thereby giving the corp no decision at all. But if you're doing that, you already have breaker redundancy and you don't really need this ID ability to begin with. Therefore, I wouldn't build a deck around saving your programs or use this as emergency card for recurring programs, because it just isn't good enough. Go play Rip Deal. I mean, it's out by now, so might as well. One thing we found about this ID is that it shares its trigger with a couple of other criminal IDs, Silhouette and most notably Gabe. It is actually remarkably similar to Gabe because you're running economy cards anyway, cards like Sure Gamble. If you end up recurring Sure Gamble, you basically get just about as much mileage out of this ID as you do with Gabe, except that Gabe is clickless, whereas this ID is more flexible in the sense that it might allow you to recurse a bigger card or some different card instead. So at first I felt it was very similar to Game, and as such, there was not much to showcase about it. Finally, it is a very generally useful ability, kind of like Andromeda, in the sense that you can't really go around building any deck out of this ID. It will work. You just get the bonus from running HQ every now and then. And it's not very easy to build around this ID ability at all because, as I said, you would have to go to the extreme and build a deck such as Wireless Net Pavilion, Data Leak Reversal deck that Siphon spams and spams Fisk Investment Seminar. There's a deck list floating around on NRDB on that, and it's pretty oppressive. But other than that very notable exception, there's very little you can do to, abuse the recursion to bring out the fullest potential of Dave Enfield. So that was what I thought, and these assumptions will be challenged in the game that we're about to see. So let's watch it play out. And off we go. Today we are up against ETF, and you'll notice that I'm not actually playing Benny Brighton just yet. We're starting off with Andromeda. But we have the rebirth in hand. I think you know where this is going. So, my opponent decides to go for the HQ and remote protection. And this opens the window for me to actually go for Temujin turn 1. I kept my opening hand because it had a variety of options for me. If my opponent decided to go Ice Heavy, I could play Sure Gamble and Career Fair Earthrise, but this opportunity was too good to pass up, so obviously I went for Temujin R&D. Got an errand down, just in case I hit agendas, but I did not. I trashed the Jackson, but allowed my opponent to have an Estelle Moon. When I saw the Estelle Moon, that was when I realized that my opponent was on Moon's ETF. So, doesn't really matter, because what was behind the remote was actually a tech startup. So my opponent shuffled their deck for me anyway. They didn't get to draw the Estelle Moon that was on the top of their deck. Then my opponent goes getting 2 power counters on the Moon, and then with the last click, they're gonna play ELP. So the ELP is going to prevent me from actually face planting into the Snow Moonlight I'd like to, because if I faceplant into a Fairchild 3.0, that would be a disaster. So I do the next best thing, which is to take Temujin money. Running R&D seems pretty prudent here, especially since I could very well hit an agenda to release myself from the shackles of ELP. So I do that, and what do you know? Sure enough, Global Food Initiative. I'll take that. 2 clicks left. Gonna run R&D again. You notice yet I'm ignoring the remotes mostly because I haven't actually found Desperado yet, so I don't actually have time to keep my opponent honest on the remotes. I don't get a 3 in a row there. All I see is friends and high places. I immediately go to look at the bin to see if my opponent could possibly play friends this turn. They probably will, just to get the Estelle Moon trigger, and that would be a nice play. They'll get the Jackson and the tech startup back. So they do activate Jeeves and then play friends. So now I need to get my priorities straight. The good news is I have a lot of money having liberated an entire Temujin off. The bad news is I still don't have Desperado. So I need to ration my clicks properly. The first thing I'm getting rid of here is tech startup. I do not want to give my opponent the ability to turn a 1 trash cost tech startup into a 4 trash cost daily business show. That's a no-go. So we are trashing that for sure. And then we have the Jackson Howard. I did contemplate trashing the Jackson Howard, but I felt like it would be better if I forced my opponent to use the Jackson Howard, shuffling stuff back from archives into R&D rather than actually trashing it myself. Because if they draw another friends in high places, or if they have a close suffrage on the table, they'll just friends the Jackson back and I would have wasted a click and 3 credits. If they really want to use the Jackson here to draw lots of cards, that's fine. They chose not to, which is very curious indeed. I would definitely have used the Jackson to draw cards there. Meanwhile, I get some board state going. You can't go wrong with these neutral resources, the daily cast ticking, the Earthrise ticking, all well and good. What I really want to do now is to land a Siphon, so that I can use my Aaron counters to clear tags, but I don't have Breaker set up yet. All I have is Paperclip in my bin. Now, it was at this point I realized that, hey, ELP is gone, I can run this remote. So I do, and sure enough, it was just a vanilla, which I could break with Paperclip from the bin. So I forced my opponent to trigger Moon there, which is good. This means they can't get a big successful field test off. And then I kind of try to draw cards here. I see a Gordian Blade, and I know this is going to be go time very soon. With Gordian Blade and Paperclip, I can very safely run through most... I can safely get through most ice. So I can threaten account Siphon next turn. Drop Gordian Blade, Siphon. Seems pretty good. And they are rich enough for me to Siphon them. So that is going to be my game plan next turn. My opponent does something curious this turn. They res team sponsorship and a Bioroid work crew. This is the new asset that allows the corp to gain an extra click right after playing an operation. So they play the Baltic Labor, gain an extra click from that, and because of that they were able to score the Vitruvius and have 1 click remaining. They could have over advanced the Vitruvius. I think I would have done that, but instead my opponent seems to have a card they really want to play from hand. Let's see what they do. They do actually end up they install a new card using team sponsorship, and then use the extra click to install an R&D ice. So now I can't siege R&D, but I don't really care about R&D at this point because the Temujin has run out. Now I want to go for HQ, but there's something really juicy in my hand. The Rebirth. So normally you would play Gordian and Siphon, but I could play Gordian, Rebirth, and then Siphon. And that seems like a much better play. Considering that I can break ice without having to worry about clicks. Given that my opponent is running asset spam, I don't have to worry about ice such as Ichi 1.0. So I'm going to take the risk there. Going to Rebirth right here into Marcus Canterbury and fire off the account Siphon. They could duck it if it's a Fairchild 3, but forcing them to res a Fairchild 3 isn't the worst thing in the world. Making them poor is definitely something I want to do right now. Unfortunately, that had to be the Sentry, the Architect. So that fires, not much I can do about that. Well, letting Architect fire is really not good, but it's not the end of the world either. I'm still going to get the Siphon through, and they'll be on 0 credits at the end of the Siphon anyway. So this buys myself quite a bit of time to poke around for agendas. This criminal deck can't really compete with HB Moons in the late game because I'm not running Aeneas Informant. So I do need to close out the game very early, as soon as possible, and this is why I'm playing so aggressively on Centrals, getting pokes, getting lots of free accesses whenever I can. Now I do get to fire off my ID ability. Okay, so you cannot recall the account Siphon here because the Siphon is still technically in play. You're still playing the account Siphon. It only goes into your bin after the Siphon resolves at the end of the run. So therefore, I can't pick Siphon as one of my targets, so what I did instead was to pick double Career Fair. My opponent ducked the Siphon, so I decided to access instead, and I stole a Project Vitruvius, putting me up to match point. So this is very good for me, and I forced my opponent to trash their, or rather I trashed their Estelle Moon after they rested to duck the Siphon. So all of a sudden I find myself flooded with Aaron counters, lots of card draw, but not much money. I do need a Temujin at this point to keep myself afloat, but instead I draw into account Siphon again, which isn't exactly what I need right now. My opponent is too poor for me to leverage on this Siphon. But yeah, what you want to do with your ID ability is actually to select two cards that are of roughly equal value. You don't want to select two cards that are too high value, such as Temujin Contract, because they will almost certainly remove the Temujin from the bin. This is why I did not select Temujin on the Siphon run last turn. If I selected Temujin and Career Fair, it's a no-brainer. My opponent would choose Career Fair and burn the Temujin. So, in this scenario, it would be different, however, because now that the Siphon's in the bin, I have two high-quality targets for my ID ability, Siphon and Temujin. That puts the corp in between a rock and a hard place, because you really don't want to give the runner either account Siphon or Temujin contracts. Both are pretty bad. So I land the Siphon here. They duck it somewhat with the total backs, but I get to select Siphon and Temujin, as I mentioned, and let's see what they choose. They actually return me the Temujin. I'm very happy about that. I take the 2 tags, but I'll be clearing them at the end of my turn. Now I'm just trying to find out what cards I should play right now to so that I can go down to my max hand size. I decide to run R&D here since my opponent's on 0 credits. I might just win right off here, but I don't. I see an Estelle Moon. My opponent can have it. They probably can't spam very well at this point, being so poor. And yeah, that's pretty good for me. As long as they stay poor, I can keep running R&D for free. If they had given me the Siphon, they would be in a really awkward position, because next turn I'll simply account Siphon again and then run R&D multiple times to get the winning agenda. So in that sense, it was rather smart for my opponent to choose the Temujin to give me instead. Still, they're going to give me a lot of gas to work with. Temujin is such a good card. I could direct Temujin at Archives here and run 4 times, but I have a better plan. Why run Archives for no accesses when you can get accesses with Sneak Door? I'm going to Temujin on HQ and Sneak Door twice. This gives me 8 credits off the Temujin, but more importantly, this also allows me to have 12 credits on Temujin on HQ, a server that I want to run anyway, which is really good. Now, what do I select here? I select Career Fair and Daily Cast, and my opponent gives me Career Fair. I'm winning anyway, because I do need the Career Fair to play the Earthrise from my hand, so I'm very happy to see to get a discount on the Earthrise. Yeah, so again, I didn't want to pick the second Siphon in my bin because I knew that my opponent would definitely exile the second Siphon no matter what. So I would much rather wait for my current Temujin to run out and then give my opponent the hard choice of Temujin or Siphon once more later. So yeah, in the meantime, my opponent actually manages to get a couple of assets on the table. As with friends, you can definitely do that. And with total backs out, they are now making money very quickly. I can't make free R&D runs right now. And given that they have a Jackson, the whatever agendas that were in hand will now be in the bin, obviously, because with Sneak Door out and Archives undefended, it makes sense to not hold any agendas in hand. So I knew that Sneak Dooring at this point would not yield very much. I'm still going to do it this turn anyway, just to get 4 credits off Temujin and 1 free credit from Desperado. And an access, why not? So I'm going to pick 2 cards here again with my ability. And what do I pick? I do pick Swirl Gamble and Earthrise. So yeah, getting an extra Earthrise, not the best thing in the world, but it's still something. One thing you notice here is that I haven't been drawing cards for a very long time. I haven't been using Aaron counters, and my last Earthrise actually ran out quite a long time ago. In fact, I should be playing the Career Fair Earthrise from my hand right now this turn. I was too busy checking remotes, and that was a misplay. Instead of sweeping remotes, I should actually spend 1 click to Career Fair the Earthrise so that I can get more draw and more momentum in the coming turns. As my opponent gains momentum from turtle backs, I should be gaining passive draw as well from my Earthrise. However, I wasn't that adversely affected simply because of my ID ability. I've been managing to recur cards like Career Fair not sure gamble, but yeah, I've been managing to recur lots of cards, and this way I was able to fuel my runs even though I wasn't actually drawing cards from my deck, and this is quite important. The Temujin, recurring Temujin was really huge. This allows me to actually pressure HQ while still maintaining a high credit level. So you can see my ID ability coming into huge play right now, even though I'm not getting any passive card draw. My ID ability makes up for that and gives me the momentum I need to check servers more often. Now my opponent reses the Fairchild on the remote against me, so I get a free run to R&D because now they're on 0 credits. Do I win the game outright here? No, I don't. I see an advanced assembly lines, which is a no-brainer trash. That's worth a lot of money to my opponent. I can't let them have that. Free click, might as well go in again, and this time I do access the Jackson Howard. Jeez. Okay, yeah, you can have Jackson Howard. It costs you clicks to draw from Jackson Howard anyway. So by this point, my opponent has drawn a couple of cards. They may or may not have an agenda in hand. I need to make sure that they're not bluffing agendas in remotes, and I need to check HQ every now and then. There's still Temujin money on HQ, so no reason not to go for HQ. Especially since my first click draw was a Dirty Laundry. It makes sense to fire the Dirty Laundry on HQ. Given that I can break most ice now that I found my Mongoose, why not? But instead I choose to go R&D instead. Yeah, so I forced the R&D Fairchild res. It's pretty expensive, but well, now that my opponent has res a relevant piece of ice, I am now able to actually... Ooh, Blacklist, spicy. Anyway, one reason I really wanted my opponent to res ice there was so that I could use the Rosetta 2.0 that you might see in my hand for Femme Patel. Converting my Sneak Door into a Femme, now that Sneak Dooring is not very viable given the Fairchild 3 that's on archives. So that was my plan, and my opponent played into my hands. I would love to Femme the Fairchild 3, so that is something I'm looking to do right now. But again, Earthrise draw, nothing much. I decided at this point that it would be pretty prudent to run HQ, given that my opponent has drawn a fair few cards and may have agendas. So I do exactly that. They have 6 credits. I really don't want to see a Fairchild 3 here, but my opponent lets me through. That's very nice. As I was contemplating what to recur with my ID ability, however, I was greeted with a nasty shock. They res a freaking Blacklist to deny me my ability. Damn it! Can't you give Samuel Newcastle upon Tyne his 15 minutes of fame? Anyway, for those of you who are unaware, with Blacklist, the corp is unable to remove the card from the game, and you are unable to return one card back into your hand. So the net effect is that your ID ability basically does absolutely nothing. Not that it mattered, because I accessed an agenda to win the game anyway. Yeah, interestingly enough, through this game, we discovered a couple of things about our good friend here that I otherwise wouldn't have. For starters, I keep thinking that this is a very similar ID to Gabe, but in reality, this gave me a lot more staying power. As I mentioned earlier, I wasn't drawing cards at all during the mid-game, but the ID ability by itself fueled me. With that recurred Temujin, I was able to earn so much money off the back of it, which allowed me to run a lot more. And instead of sitting back and trying to find my money, and that was huge because that allowed me to get the final few agendas. And another nuance about this ID is that it is good against Ice Light Corps. Naturally, you will more likely make more successful runs, HQ runs, against Ice Light Corps such as this asset heavy HB. Against a more ice-based deck like Glacier decks, Los would be a much better ID because you get a lot more triggers of Los. So yeah, there's a very strong distinction between our good friend James Warwick here against Los. You would wish that you can change your ID based on the corp that you're up against, and you kind of can. You can play Rebirth for that. Speaking of Rebirth, this ID is not actually one that you need on turn 1, unlike Gabriel Santiago. Reason being that Gabe's ability is turned on from turn 1. However, this ID isn't, because to use this ID effectively, you need 2 useful cards in your bin to begin with. And that didn't happen for me until turn 3 or 4. And not to mention that to fill up my bin with useful cards, I actually needed to start off as Andromeda, because that allowed me to start with 4 extra cards, have that sure gamble, those career fairs in the bin to begin with. So something to take note of. It's not horses out of the gate racing as with Gabriel Santiago, but it gives you a lot more bite, a lot more power in the mid game when you are selecting cards such as Account Siphon and Temujin for the corp to return to your hand. Finally, this ID is particularly powerful against decks that are afraid of events that are rather potent to them. So Account Siphon, as you saw in this game, was so devastating to my opponent that they would rather give me a Temujin. That shows you how powerful events can be. And certain events, criminal events such as emergency shutdown, can be really disastrous for certain big ice decks as well. So if you're up against corps that are afraid of such events, you can use this ID's ability to actually have a lot of impact during the game. All in all I can say is that if you're looking for a fun ID, I think Seder is one of the best design corp IDs in recent history, because, picking stuff from your bin to recur is very fun. And you can say the same about our good friend here. Nothing is more better than watching your opponent squirm as you pick two awesome events to recur. So yeah, that's all from me, and that's all from David Lan5 Hugwingach Gogari Kunrobulantisilio Go Go Go. Until next time, thanks for watching and happy net running. See you around.